council work session meeting for August 13th. It is 4:01 p.m. Roll call.
Linda Sosa.
Joanna.
Britt Hornsby.
Jennifer Davila.
Ann Lepinen.
Erin Nelson, serving as town manager.
All right. Is that it? Is that everybody? Or something? Okay, awesome. All right, so first line item is a discussion of fire restrictions.
So sorry.
No worries. Go ahead, Ann.
So this was on the agenda because we've been drier than the rest of the state and the state hasn't imposed restrictions yet. I've been watching the weekly, kind of bi-weekly reports. I'm not there, so I'm not sure what the dryness is, if we need to just table this and keep watching. Chief Lott did raise the question about a week ago, but I haven't had any communication with him since.
I just had a little communication, not in person, but he's inclined, he said he'd back us if we wanted to move forward, but he wasn't inclined to do it at this time, to change what they've had. We've been getting some monsoon moisture, so it's not as dry as some years. Getting clouds every day and so on. So he wasn't pushing it. I was going to defer it to him to decide that, and he said that he wasn't inclined to change it. So.
Okay. Guess I defer to him too.
Yeah.
All right.
Are the monsoons over? I mean, we've been having monsoons every night.
Mm-hmm.
Ernesto is the new storm, but I don't think it's coming our way.
Well, what helps is, as much as anything, is the cloud cover this time of year, and everything is pretty moist. But we can look at it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can always put it back on the agenda. That's not a problem. But I would agree. I think that if the chief is okay with it and no one else has an objection, let's not go down that path right now.
Just in the 7-day forecast, we were clear to, and we were supposed to have a slight chance tonight. It's supposed to clear up for the next couple of days, but then they're calling for more rain this weekend as well. So I'm okay with holding off until at least next week.
All right, any more discussion on it? All right, and moving to number 2, a discussion of enforcement, including animals at large and dangerous animals. Ann?
So it appears that there's been another run of animals, particularly dogs, on the loose, and I just put this on mostly for enforcement to get us thinking about, now that we've hired a bookkeeper, a note taker, a project manager, we should really start talking seriously about how the budget can handle a civil code enforcement person. But it reared its head on the dogs again. One resident on the west side has had some dog issues with chasing runners and bikes, and I believe somebody has reached out in the community and talked with that person, and hopefully that's kind of under control. The second is I had a call from Jeremy Amadou from the deputy from the San Juan County Sheriff yesterday, Monday, about a dog and complaints from people about this particular dog. And when I'd been getting a lot of texts from the community. I'm not there, so I can't see it, but I am aware of the situation. I called Deputy Hamadou back. He asked me if I had talked with vice sheriff, whatever they call the assistant sheriff, Alan Freestone, about animals at large and Bluff's lack of an ordinance on animals. And I told him that I had, but it was easily pre-pandemic or the start of pandemic. I think even slightly before that, but I've had no other discussions with the sheriff or the assistant deputy sheriff, Alan Freestone. But I did fill him in on what we talked about. I filled in Deputy Hamadou. And then I said, coincidentally, we have enforcement on our work session and we'll be doing some discussion. One of the things we need, and we know we do need to do, is begin enforcement, civil enforcement. I intended in September to have a conversation with the sheriff's department, with a couple other law enforcement, to get some feedback as to whether they were aware of somebody who might be potentially a good contract person, because it's not going to be a lot of money. We don't have a lot of need for enforcement. And, then making sure we've got the system in place. But on the particular complaint that he was calling about, I told him that this was a domestic issue. It is not a dog issue. It is not a town issue. It's not an enforcement issue. And after I talked with him and gave him the information that I had, and he agreed that this would be something the deputies would be handling. So other than the occasional runaway dog that's chasing bikes and whatever, in the big picture, again, we're back to, we should talk about enforcement in this fall when we get through a couple of other big pieces. But that's what the enforcement about is, like raising it to the next level. If we need to be looking at the budget, see what we can handle, put out some feelers about how we would do it. But there, in my mind, there is no immediacy on the dog issue.
So if I'm understanding correctly, we don't, so I know planning and zoning back in 2020 had drafted a residential agriculture, farm animal and domestic animal regulation ordinance. And again, it was a draft. And I don't think it ended up going anywhere. But what I'm hearing is that you are proposing that we get the enforcing body first, and then would need to write code regarding any kind of animal issue, that we don't want to start working on the code before we have someone to actually do anything about it. Is that accurate?
That would be my approach. Certainly, I'm only one of 5+ staff, but to me, we keep writing things that have enforcement issues and we don't have enforcement. And that plus COVID plus chaos in 2020 was why we just set it aside. But from my way of thinking, we need to look at what our resources are. I don't want to beat a dead anything, but I've said it before. Once you start writing violations, whether there's civil or otherwise, you then have to have an appeal method. You have to have a court system. You have to have a whole lot of things. And so before we throw in another enforcement type ordinance that's going to be very controversial, I personally think we need to see what our money looks like and what our availability is.
Well, given that this is a work session, I'm curious, just continuing this discussion about like the time commitment that we think, let's stick to just code enforcement, like clearly from a police and police, fire, all that stuff, that's like a whole nother ballgame, especially when we get into like violence and things like that. But from like a strict code enforcement way of thinking of things, what do we, and like I think it's probably going to be, and again, like your thoughts. I mean, you seem to get the brunt of the public who's telling you about issues. I know most of those funnel through you, but do you have any idea or indication of like how much time per week, per month you think that an individual would need to be contracted for us to start estimating?
For the actual enforcement piece of it, again, the 3 pieces I can think of that the town, well, maybe 4, like maybe speed limits on the back streets, that's not really civil. Weed, noxious weeds, animal control kinds of things, and exterior lighting signs. Those are the major ones. I would think that given the level of the complaint or the easiness of resolving some of the issues, somewhere between 8 and 10 hours a month max and I think even 8 is probably pushing it. But where you really get into it then, Erin, is with, let's say, Ritz cited for a dog at large, and he disagrees. It's not his dog. It's Sarah's dog. And now we're going to have a contest over whose dog is this. And now we're going to have an appeal and a court system. And that's where we're going to have to seriously look at contracting, like with Blanding or Monticello or San Juan County, for that piece of. Or is there another way around it? And maybe that's something that's a legal resource that we ask attorney, like, how do we get around having some kind of complicated, expensive appeal? But the actual enforcement, I think, I'm going to revise it 5 to 8 hours. I don't think it takes that much to do that. The cost, I have no idea. I haven't priced that out.
Okay. Knowing that enforcement is a large issue in our long-term strategic plan, I am also curious if we have someone who's been assigned, and like just throwing it out there. I don't remember who was assigned to enforcement. It probably was me. But in terms of like doing the research, in terms of like what are other small municipalities doing, like very clearly, this is a small municipality problem in terms of the cost and the hours, and how do you find the person who does this much and covers what we still need. So when we get to the strategic plan, I think that's something that we really need to look at. But and again, like we're going to set up a system that works well for Bluff, but clearly there are other small municipalities who go through this same kind of growing pains of getting these types of positions filled. And so I am very curious what the comparables are. And then, in talking to Chris, I know you've had some discussions regarding, enforcement and writing letters and things like that. But I would be curious if he has any recommendations on, what other municipalities are doing, and how we kind of draw that line regarding code enforcement versus, I'll use the word use the term like a more serious offense that's going to require law enforcement. So code enforcement, I guess that's it. Code enforcement versus law enforcement, and how we can distinguish between the two, or what the escalation process is when we get there, because we do have a unique opportunity to be able to set out our entire system. And I don't see us getting away from, still needing to have that in our local communication and collaboration with San Juan County Sheriff's Office. But, clearly there are things that we need to bring under our umbrella. So when we get to the strategic plan, I think we need to start talking about, assigning roles and clearly, breaking this out to have some meaningful discussions about like what are the steps we need to take and what are other communities doing to address this. And just so everyone knows, the drafted animal ordinance is still on our website. So the way that I have it, I've got our resolutions on a page, we have our ordinances on a page, and at the bottom, there are drafted ordinances, because I know that, there have been a couple that planning and zoning had been working on, and then, just either didn't get the traction or our priorities changed. So that one is still out there. So like I pulled a copy of it for the meeting today, but I'm curious, especially kind of related to some of the issues that we've been hearing recently. I think this is much more like livestock driven as opposed to some of these like roaming dog. I think there are some little things in there. But just so folks know, that draft is out there. We're not doing anything with it currently based on our conversation today, but I have not removed it from the website since it was still a draft, I guess. So unless the council wants me to do otherwise, I will just leave it there.
For the purposes of not confusing the community, from my view personally, I think we should talk about removing something like that. It's 4 years old at this point. We did have a fair amount of feedback on that with some very interesting feedback on it. And I really, at this point, until we figure out how this all works, I don't see this as happening in this calendar year, and maybe not even in this fiscal year. I think looking at how we set up enforcement and the cost of it is much more important than this. I think seriously, with the exception of the one dog owner, every other complaint I've had in the last 2 years have been a random dog, like a dropped off dog, or somebody's dog escaped for the day, made the big breakout. But there's just one person whose name keeps surfacing very regularly for the dogs that get out. There was another person. That person has done a very good job of containing those dogs, and they're not having the regular escapes. And having had dogs and my dogs escaping, I can totally relate to the escaped dog, but the ones who are allowed to run loose are the problem, and there just appears to be right now one in the last 2 years.
See, Jen has her hand raised.
You're good, Jen.
Do we have, should we direct people to call the sheriff's office if we have a stray dog? I mean, since we don't have Bark intact anymore, I mean, I really hesitate to call the sheriff's office, just having to deal with a stray for the last week and a half myself. I don't want to call the sheriff's office because I know that they're going to come impound the dog and then they're going to kill the dog in a week. I mean, so do we have some sort of way? I hate to lose Bark just because of this problem, but at the same time, I had a stray dog here at my business for a week and a half that she wasn't aggressive, fortunately, but had she been aggressive, then that would have been even more of an issue. I can't personally take another dog, if we had a process, do we call Underdog and try to see if we can find fosters? That was just such a crucial thing that Bark provided for us that I don't know, that might be something more immediate to address.
I think, Jen, to answer your question, is calling San Juan County deputies for a stray dog is going to be neither helpful to them or helpful to anybody at this point. We don't have an ordinance. We're incorporated. They'd like us to have an ordinance and a dog pound and a method of doing it, picking them up, but they're not going to pick up stray dogs. That's been pretty clear to me since my conversation with Deputy Freestone. And again, we haven't had much of a problem because, like you said, Bark handled that. Now we don't have Bark. But again, this is a big picture kind of discussion as to, what we're able to do as a town, what's our obligation as a town. I think certainly dangerous dogs are our obligation. Beyond that, I'm not really sure. So it's really exploring for the next couple of months, like enforcement in general, specifically then, what do we do in the meantime? But I would encourage people in the community that unless the dog is aggressive and you don't know the owner, where you could just place a call or get in touch with them, we're not going to get deputy response. And I think that's fair. It's not on the highway. It's not their jurisdiction. It's a civil issue. Not much of an answer, sorry.
My comment would be that without an ordinance specifically saying a leash, dogs must be on a leash, you can't, there's nothing for them to come back up. So it's the same as some of these other ones. If we have an ordinance in place, then they'll come. But if we don't, they leave us to do our own rules and decide what we allow and what we don't allow, which is what I appreciate. of them. They recognize our laws, and if we don't mind dogs running around, they let us be at it. But I think if a dog was biting somebody or something, that goes into a different category. You have an injury and they'll come. But just wandering around without a leash law, they won't do anything.
Well, so would we be able to get planning and zoning to update or work on an ordinance for something like the dogs and just have it ready for when we move into enforcement possibilities next year?
So that was one of their questions that's coming up on the strategic plan. It goes along with the noise ordinance too, as to like how many do they get and how many are they responsible for? And what I keep thinking, going back to our strategic plan, I know the noise ordinance is on there. I don't know that the animal or the RV, any of the other ones, I don't believe are in there, but I may be wrong. I don't even see the noise ordinance in this one now. I know it was on their chart when they came and pulled their chart up. But I think we need to make sure we're following it and get the priorities done.
You've got this.
We've got one, but
Is there a?
I just don't see that chart that showed everybody in their assignment and that kind of thing. It must be all
so
online.
I don't know if we're ready to move on to the strategic plan, if this is a good way to do that, or if there are any other comments
Was
about that.
Anything anybody else wants to say about ordinances or enforcement?
Well, at one point, we were talking to other towns, and it was really helpful because one of the things that they told us were things that didn't work. The big one I remember was, I believe it was Tory, tried to limit how many dogs people had, and eventually found out that they couldn't do it. And so it was really helpful reaching out to others.
Well, and on that note, San Juan County, if you have more than 3 dogs, you're considered a kennel. 3 or more than 3, I can't remember now. But as far as the county ordinances, but again, they don't impact us because we're not county.
Anything else? All right, well, moving along to number 4, or note number 3, council member reports on monthly progress of strategic plan assignments. I can go first. I haven't had a lot of movement on much. Work has been gobbling up almost all of my time lately, but I did meet with Gary to talk about the BWW consultation thing, and I'm looking for an email from him to give out some dates, work on some dates for October, November, December maybe, for that consultation process. So other than that, I haven't had much movement. That's it for me.
I've also done that. And the other thing that I'm doing is working with Melanie on training to how to do the bookkeeping system and the other things that we have in place. And at the moment, it's definitely slowed because it's the audit season. But the things that we have done, she's done great. So it's really positive.
Is Melanie helping you with the audit?
No, the audit is, you have to be so precise. It'd be totally boring to start with. I spent the day finding invoices and scanning.
Is she shadowing you at all though? Because
Like-
next year she's gonna have to do it herself. So are you pulling her in to just show her kind of what you're doing and how you're doing it?
So yeah, I keep all the paperwork. We've gone over some of it. We should have a different auditing company next year. And so, I assume they will have they have to have the same information, but they could easily be doing it differently than ours, so.
All right. Anything else for you, Linda?
No,
I guess I can go next. On the active transportation plan, we are still just in a holding pattern to see when UDOT acts on their grant and comes to town to do design work here and planning on the other stretch. Again, it's their grant, so we will be involved, I'm sure, but it is their project. Don't have any more update from that, really. I don't think anything else transpired. And then the other thing I was going to bring up was planning and zoning. They are willing to do the noise ordinance if we had a joint meeting with them and kind of laid out what we wanted, kind of the parameters of what they would want, how, you know, like which part they were wondering somewhat about if it falls into their jurisdiction. And there was kind of back and forth, like, well, this is more of a nuisance thing, like, but it's also like the lighting. So Amanda pointed out that there are different zones that you could have different noise levels, you know, so it could kind of fall in that way. So they're not sure that they should or shouldn't do it, but they are willing to do it if that's what we want them to do. If that's not them, then we would need to figure out what other group would be better suited, or we just turn it over to the attorney, but then it's more expensive. Most of the the comments were jake breaking and that kind of thing, which is the same sort of animal ordinance. They will come and enforce that and put the signs up and whatnot if we have an ordinance. And that one was in the strategic plan. So, but anyway, that's where they're at, and they just wanted a little feedback back from us of how they would go about that if we decide that's what's the next priority.
So, do we want to discuss that or move on? I feel like we kind of just talked about that.
Yeah, I
Talked about it, and then I was supposed to take that to them because they were the assignment on the strategic plan. So at some point, if this isn't a work session to talk about it, then a separate one. But anyway, the idea is to get communication back to them, whether that's the next. And it's the same situation as the animal one. They've got a whole draft. Is it on the website, the noise one, their draft ordinance, or is?
I think it might be.
They had-
It's another really old one, right?
Right. Yeah, it was an original one that they were working with side by side with the lighting. But
I don't have the noise. I do have the draft, or I do have the animal. But the
okay.
noise one was.
But they
never-
have it, and they said they could pull it out, use it as a start, update it, or whatever. Even if it becomes another committee or something that works on it, they have that already started for starting to cut and whatever. So.
Go ahead, Ann.
Yeah, I just think this brings it back to, we need to have a serious discussion where we can do it in a meeting and vote on it about what we're going to do with enforcement, period, from that word alone, just enforcement. Animal enforcement, lighting or enforcement, noise enforcement. I would agree with planning and zoning that noise is a nuisance. It's not necessarily something that falls within their purview. And if it's really a matter of jake breaking, that's a pretty straightforward thing for somebody to write. But I think, again, to me, I'd like to see the bigger discussion be enforcement first, funding first, availability first, before we throw in another group of ordinances that we're not enforcing. So
how do we change that on our strategic plan?
well, this, unless I'm mistaken, and somebody certainly correct me because I'm not playing at my top game right now, but strategic plans are like general plans. They're not locked in wood. They're planning. You're moving forward. You're fine tuning. they're aspirational. You know, so when we're revisiting the strategic plan like we're supposed to do, okay, this move from point, bottom of the heap to top level, we need to work on this. That's my thought. But again,
I don't see how working on enforcement is going against any of those things in the strategic plan, because in the same meeting that Linda was just discussing with the number of dogs that you can have, the mayor also suggested that you don't pass any ordinances that you can't enforce, because otherwise you're going to beat your head up against the wall. And I think that we're finding that. So therefore, to me, the enforcement piece has to be in place for all of these ordinances to be effective and not a waste of time. So I think that is moving towards working on ordinances in the strategic plan. It's just a step that we've encountered that we need to focus on in order to move forward with the rest of them.
So certainly I agree with Jen. I think enforcement, that's a big piece of the strategic plan in general. It's moving all of this so we can actually accomplish it. So in this work session today, I would recommend that we do assign some specific tasks that we can do to get further on the enforcement piece. And I think that fits under our discussion for the strategic plan. Now enforcement is not an area that we've talked broadly about enforcement, but it's not an area like one particular person was assigned to. But I do think that there are some things that we can do individually that we can have a more meaningful discussion if we're starting to take these steps. So got a lot more people in the meeting. How can we break this down into specific tasks and assign out that we can come back and say, we worked on this during our September work session? I'm seeing very specifically that we should probably do a review of what other smaller municipalities are doing for code enforcement specifically.
And Ann, you said you already asked the sheriffs and for recommendations.
so what I threw out to Deputy Hamadou is, if there are folks on the force already who might be interested in a very small contract, and he knows who they are, or he has a conversation, they could let us know. But what I told Deputy Hamadou is that given the way August looks, there's no way in holy hell I'm going to even make a call to the sheriff's department until September. There's just no way. If somebody else can do that, that would be great. My August, I can't do it.
I can do it.
Perfect. I think that's great. And then I think a piece of this too is defining the contract and the scope of work. I think that's going to be an internal discussion, and then also bringing in our legal counsel to help us really define that, because until we know what that is, we have no idea what the cost is going to be. So that's definitely something that I can work on in terms of getting that drafted scope of work. And then that also leads to, again, this idea of reviewing what other communities are doing. So we have, and again, we're not trying to mimic anyone, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to. Does someone have time to do a little bit of comparison to other communities and what they're doing for code enforcement specifically?
If we can wait until September, that is something that I can ask people about when I go to the conference.
Perfect. Utah League is good call. Yep. And it's early September. So for folks listening, that is early September. We're not 2 months out.
Right. No, it's I think it will come. I think it does fall before our next work session as well. So
great. That would be super helpful. And then Linda, you're attending. You're attending as well. Yeah. So yeah, you and Jen.
Linda and I are both going.
Beautiful. Okay, that sounds great. Any other actionable tasks that we want to assign for this one? I'm sure things will kind of creep up as we're having these conversations. And
I do think this has to go on the agenda next week to have a vote to support moving forward on enforcement in general. because we will be expending some attorney's fees, we'll be expending some detail on this. So I'm going to say that I'm going to do the agenda. I will let you know more tomorrow whether I'm able to do the agenda.
Sure.
So right now I am taking notes to do the agenda. We'll see how tomorrow plays out. So if everyone's okay with that, I'll add it to the agenda. Short discussion. We don't need to rehash everything we talked about today. Just we want to move forward.
All right, well, we kind of circled back to enforcement number. Do we want to go back to number 3? Luann, did you have anything else? Strategic
No,
plan?
I did not.
All right, so
Jen,
yeah,
I think I was next. I would like to request because I cannot seem to find. Aaron, do you have a more complete list of whose tasks are what?
Yeah, I can. So let me
Yeah,
share.
if you could send that to me.
Yeah. Do you want me to
Because
share?
the list that I have right now has me on a couple of things, but I think I'm on more, and I can't seem to find the list that is most recent.
Gotcha. Yeah, the one that I've been working off of is this PowerPoint presentation, and I was just kind of making some updates, and like we'll just have iterations. But there's probably a better way to track this, so I can put that together and then have something that's a little bit more manageable. But yeah, Jen, I'll send this to you, and then I will make
Perfect.
better use. So because I appreciate Julie and Judith's vision, but I think for us to make it actionable, we can probably massage that a little
and then
bit.
we can add that to our little paper copies, those of us who can flip
Yeah,
through
Yes.
if we had
Totally.
those
So some of the
signed and whatnot.
So some of the things that I'm pretty sure I'm on is, working through the development of the CCC with the DRC. We are definitely, it's a hit and miss right now. I don't know. We did just receive our bids for architecture. This is going to be an interesting conversation. I wish I felt more confident than I do in the process right at the moment. So that's definitely in process and action. As you all know, we have a project manager now, so it's great to have Malia on board because it's another person to take some weight off of Aaron mostly. So that's the progress with that. Another thing that I'm pretty sure I'm on is the West Park discussion. And with that, as you all know, we have the kiosk going in. We've had discussion about the handicap accessibility and where to plan with that with West Park. So there's that. And then another thing that I know that I'm on is developing a calendar with the business owners of Bluff. And we are in the process of trying to come up with some more festival type ideas, and nothing's been set in stone with that. We have the art festival coming up in October, which isn't business owners of Bluff, but it's still, community related. We have the balloon festival planning to happen again. And then we're trying to figure out a dark sky festival probably. And hopefully we have done that a couple of times in the past, and hopefully we can expand that and make it more, more attended and more of a festival rather than sorry.
Are you okay? Oh dear.
I'm fine. I'm going to get a drink. Swallowed air down the wrong pipe or something there because I'm not even drinking anything. But hoping to make that more of a community, a bigger event than it has been in the past. So that's those are the 3 things that I know that I'm on that list. I think that I'm on for more, but I just can't figure out what they are.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Ann?
So I have been in very brief communications with our fire chief over the emergency operations plan. I'm hoping that before he takes a sabbatical, we'll have that a little more nailed down. But there was there have been a couple interesting pieces of information that I learned in the last couple of weeks, and talking about the generators that we've put 2 grants in for. There is a computer system set up that the fire department has. I believe it's the fire department and not EMS, but that shows who's on oxygen. And so being able to link that and build that into that plan, because when things go down, it's that manual right now phone calling that we all do to check on folks. And so there may be already a system in place that we can tie our hopeful generators into with the emergency plan. I've been slowly going back to read the EPA information on the draft that I have received for the sole source on the water. So that's slow. Again, it's been kind of a crazy last 2 months in terms of work on the litigation, and so I haven't made a great deal of progress on any one thing, other than to point out that we did achieve our goal on sustainable town government and hiring a note taker, bookkeeper, and a CCC manager, which took a fair amount of resources from all of us to get to this point, but we're there. And I think those are the main things I've been working on, since litigation is not a listed topic. That's taken up a lot of time. But I'm still working on my projects. And the main ones really are like trying to work that emergency operations plan, getting something, on sole source, but also Sarah Barak and I are waiting for the draft on that memorandum of understanding from our attorney, who has also been tied up in our litigation and understandably has not been able to get to that.
Thanks, Ann. Do you have anything you want to add?
I've got a few work in progress. So on the strategic plan, we specifically talk about engineering and architectural services. We'll talk about that later, but that's moving along. In progress for me, I have a very drafted, not ready to present, org chart, working on some internal SOPs and policies. Melanie is working on researching the credit card processing system for us and like electronic payments. So that's really exciting. P&Z actually took the first step in developing like an overview of town ordinances when they put together that really nice visual list of like, when is a building permit required? When is a land use clearance required? And that document, I think, will be a nice template for like some of the other more digestible visuals that we can share with residents for all of our ordinances. So they took an awesome step there, that clearly we want to make all of our ordinances, readily accessible. And that includes having kind of like a high level view of them. And then clearly capital projects is still in process, but I'm with Ann. The hiring of the bookkeeper, note taker, and CCC manager is huge. So that's a big win. So I will update the PowerPoint. We'll send it back out, and then we'll see if we can find like a better template so we can track and make these like super meaningful discussions during our work sessions. Because yeah, I agree, Jen, it is not super easy to keep track of what we're assigned to right now.
Awesome. Would anybody like to add anything else? Great. Well, moving on to number 4, discussion of capital improvement projects.
Yes. So another one that is hard to track. So I think the last time I left you all, we were talking about the need to get like a better understanding of how much the Calf Canyon like road project would cost. And I'm just curious if that's still something that we want quotes on, an idea of how we get that. Because that one's definitely kind of a big hole in like our total estimated project cost for capital projects. And so I will start the discussion there.
Go ahead, Ann.
I think that Michael Havocan, I haven't talked to him in a couple of weeks, but my recollection, such as it is that he is working with an engineering firm to have them look at various places, Calf Canyon being one of them, the repair on that. And he's back in town. So it could be that maybe having a meeting with Michael to see where he is with that and where the engineering is with that. But I do know that since we approved him getting an engineer, I know that an engineer was down and looked at projects. And he may already have that. I am just a little behind on looking at things.
Yeah, he hasn't sent anything out that they've been back, but we did approve that engineering having them look at, and I'm pretty sure that included repair of that damage.
Yeah, I'm curious if it, like, the damage versus the culverts versus, like, I don't know how all that's broken out, but since he's back, it definitely will be easier to talk to him. So that was a big hole in the overall capital projects plan. And then, based on that, then we can figure out some timing.
Does talking with Michael need to be like an agenda thing, or is that just something to do behind the scenes?
I could probably reach out to him so I have something to like formally present at a meeting in terms of cost. So I'll take that as an action item, and then you all would still this whole plan we need formal approval on.
Okay.
One of the other areas that we had kind of tabled a little bit was just the plan for Barwell. And so I don't know if that needs to be like its own agenda item on a work session, but that was definitely that particular asset is listed on here. And I don't know which direction it's going, whether it's putting more money into it or attempting to dispose of a property in some way to contribute to some of our other fiscal needs. But that is also a large hole in my capital plan.
Is yours something that you can share?
The only thing, I mean, I can share my screen, like the Excel document that I'm looking at. It's not
I
anything.
think that's the one that wouldn't
super
open. I assume that's the one that wouldn't open.
Can you all, it's probably coming
Yeah.
up.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is it online? Yeah. So this was the list of projects. And the few that, some of these, we've got some estimates on, like the solar, those are going to be closer estimates, but things like the airport, specifically Barwell, and then Cap Canyon Road, those are all pretty big items that I'd want to have kind of shored up a little bit in terms of our plans for before I would want to put this before you to like officially vote on. Very specifically, this Cap Canyon one, because I think it'll be a little bit more expensive. Clearly, the CCC is underway, that's fine. But the airport, to have a cost to the town for $225,000 projected in fiscal year 2029, I mean, that's a significant chunk of change. And out of all of the projects we have on there, that's a big one, and it's a known cost. I mean, that's what the engineers have quoted us that we would need to contribute to match. This is a 10% match to the $2.25 million that the state of Utah would be doing. So that's a big cost. So I think we should talk about that. And then Barwell, what are we doing with that asset? And then, I think clearly the Cap Canyon one, it's a Class C road. We need to maintain it, need to make sure that everything's good there. But I need a better cost estimate before we try to figure out what the timing is and things like that. So of all those three assets, does anyone have comments, thoughts? Do we need to talk about them individually?
Go ahead, Ann.
Well, I apologize on the Barwell one. I said that I would go to the county and get the information related to the deed history to see if there are any restrictions or covenants on that. However, last week when I had on my calendar to pop over there because I was in Monticello, that went to a whole different plan on what I was doing, so I didn't make it to the county offices. I did send an email a month ago to the head of the recorder's office asking for that information, thinking that should be a very straightforward question. However, I didn't get a response. So I will give that a shot again. I do think that that question needs to be answered. I think Luann raised it. I've never seen anything historically in the BSA information that would indicate it was encumbered by a restriction. That doesn't mean it wasn't. And nobody seems to know exactly where that firewall came from. I certainly have no idea. It's just there. So I will try to follow up on that and get some more information before the next time we have to talk about this.
And I don't know how much the fee would be, but Southeast Title and, oh, they've changed their name. There's something else. But anyway, title company, that's kind of their job. I wonder if it'd be simplest just to have them tell us if we can sell it, what we've got in there, what they.
Well, they wouldn't be able to tell us whether we could sell it or not. All they'll do is a title search, which I did for 8 years. I know how to do title searches. And so it's just a matter of looking at the chain of title. And I can do that. It's finding the time. I don't really at this point want to recommend spending the money for a title search because we don't need it. But if people want to spend money, I can put it on the agenda and you can vote and hire a title company. And
So we're just trying to figure out how the water is impacted. If you, like, what's the problem with it? What are we trying to figure out?
I posed probably 9 months ago that perhaps Barwell should be looked at as an asset that should be sold to help us cover some of the expenses of the CCC. That was before we got the grants, thanks to Aaron and Drew and everybody who worked on them. But I still would like to go back to that question I have, which is, what are we doing with Barwell? It's sitting, it's vacant, it looks like whatever, an abandoned lot. What are we doing with it and what can we do with it? If it's restricted and we can't sell it and selling is totally off the table, then what are we doing as a property to protect the asset? When I drove past there last week, again, there was trash, beer cartons, beer cans, pop cans, and weeds. It looks horrible. So that's the question, but I personally think that you just need to look at the deeds and see what the transfers.
Jen, your hand's up.
Yeah, it wasn't one of the questions that came up with that was whether it was actually purchased or if it was gifted. And similar to alleys and things like that, as far as I can remember in past discussions, if it was gifted, we can't necessarily sell it. I think that was one of the things that came up with I say alleys and right-of-ways was because that was a problem that the county encountered. And then the second would be to find out what needs to happen with the well, since it is still, although it's offline, connected to the community water system. I thought those were two of the things that were kind of hiccups with the whole thought of selling it.
Well, in the water system, a title insurance company is not going to give you an opinion on water or the wells. And so that's a whole separate issue. But yes, and the gift versus deeded depends on what's recorded. I mean, it's all the same thing. You need to look at how it was transferred. So if it's not recorded on the deed, it's going to be a hard sell to say, well, I gave it to somebody 100 years ago who gave it to somebody who gave it to somebody who gave it to you, and I didn't mean that you could use it for whatever you wanted or you could sell it. So it really is a deed issue of looking, I think. But again, it's been a long time since I looked at that stuff, but that's definitely the starting point. And then the water is a huge issue.
All right, so that kind of addresses Barwell. We know the next step for that. based on the rest of these, is there anything else that we want to discuss today? Any questions that I can answer?
Have we ever put a priority to any of these things? I mean, we've talked about priority several times, like the airport is kind of lower priority because it's such a high cost. Some of these things maybe could be moved up in a priority list, like what does free Wi-Fi look like, that type of thing. I am unclear as to what a priority system would be to this list.
I agree. I agree, and that will also help us indicate. I mean, a few of these are tied to other projects, which we know it's going to be happening in like fiscal year 2025 or 2026. But then there are others that, they're just kind of floating out there and don't have any timing or priority to. So probably the easiest way, without putting them like just in 1, 2, 3 order, is for us to just, if it's okay, Mayor Pro Tem, that we can just go down this list and we just say, this is high priority, high, medium, or low, and that'll get us started, because you've got just EPA project bids and other after this. So maybe we just go down and we say, this is high, this is low. Let me do this so you have room. Okay, so I guess we're kind of looking for consensus, and if you are very strong in a different direction, let's give the reasoning for it. Okay, so CCC building renovation.
Aye.
Everyone feels good about that.
I agree, high. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Airport repaving project.
Low for me.
Low.
Low.
Calf Canyon road replacement and more like culverts and stuff.
So can we just back up to the airport? Just so if we are saying low enough that we're not going to put money towards it, then that means we probably lose the airport, and then some private or the county would take it back over, and then they would be out of our jurisdiction for lighting and noise and the rest.
So I will preface this with, yes, absolutely would be a concern. My hope would be that even the low priority items on our list could be accomplished once we have a full financial outlook as to how much all this is going to cost. I'm not saying that we won't have $225,000 by FY 2029. It's possible that if we don't do our budgeting right, that we might not. But I do think that Luann has, that is kind of this was unspoken and kind of spoken, right? Like if it's not a priority to us, if we don't want the airport, if we're not budgeting for it, then I can't see how we could continue. And even from like an FAA standpoint, if we don't maintain that airport, we cannot continue to be the lessees.
And then you have to remove the stuff that's on the BLM lease, and it's a little bit more complicated than just.
Well, I wasn't under the impression that we were cutting anything from the list. We were just talking about just identifying.
That was my thoughts too.
Yeah, just
projects to work on
identifying
immediately.
what's like immediate need, like a much more than something that's got like those bad consequences. Maybe we bump it up to medium if those consequences merit
it. If I said something about like it's low, but the financial planning to achieve this project is of high importance, would that be an okay way to look at it? Like it's low on our list, it's further out in time, but we know that it's costly. So figuring out how we get there financially to still address it is important. That also would give the council time to ensure that we're still all on the same page in terms of, yes, this is an asset we want to continue to have versus no, this is not, something that's going to continue to drive revenue for the town, or would start driving revenue for the town. So yeah, would that cover that concern?
Sure, that seems fine. It just there needs to be a plan for it.
Yeah.
For either direction, you're either saving money or you're trying to figure out what the alternatives are. Because if there's not an alternative, then we need to save the money.
I'm feeling like this one is probably going to be like its own agenda item. That's gonna need like a lot of.
And some
Oh, yeah.
research,
Yeah,
to
totally.
find out what,
I'd love to see like how many people are using it. I mean, it's just such a big.
and what happens if we
Yeah.
don't hold up our end of the lease.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. For the Cap Canyon road replacement, again, looking at like culverts and everything to do with that road, where are we at in terms of priority?
I mean, I think it's fairly high. I mean, it looks like it's getting worse. Like so. I don't
Yeah.
know.
To me, it's high because if we don't fix it, it's gonna cost more. The more
Yeah.
and more erosion. I was gonna drive up there in the middle of that rain the other night to see how that water's
What it was
getting there.
doing.
I think it's probably erosion, but that's part of what the engineers are looking at is where that erosion is coming from, because it's not clear. There's not really water coming across the road, but we are losing the road, some sort of collapse.
As I'm going through this too, I think it's going to be probably maybe for our next discussion on this, maybe I can develop a brief description or a description of what each of these look like so we all kind of understand the project scope. Because even looking at this right now, like I'm looking at the next one for the Bluff Cemetery, I'm like, well, what all is encompassed there? But still, in terms of how we're doing this, I'd still like to get the priorities done.
Totally.
I think that'll help all of us when we talk about this.
Go ahead, Ann. I've muted Ann.
With your permission, I'm logging off, Brett.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
So Ann left the meeting.
Ann has left the meeting. Yeah, sorry.
No, sorry.
No, you did. Good work. Thank you. You go ahead, Jen.
I think that one of the reasons to put that, to justify that being higher on the on the list is to remember that that's also the main access for our Rocky Mountain Power utility type things. And if we have a serious problem with that road and then we have a serious power outage or something like that, that's detrimental to everybody in the community. So that's one of the reasons that that project would be of higher considerance to me.
Great point.
Sweet. Good to move on to the next one.
Yes, please.
Okay, Bluff Cemetery.
So the Bluff Cemetery, that's been a project for a while to get it to the town and out of the county so that the town has jurisdiction over it. I can't imagine that there's that much legal expense, but I don't know what the 15,000 is for. I know there's been some discussion of fence and I think that's one of those laws that's written in there. So if you need a fence in an area, you can go put one in, but like Blandings isn't fence. So I don't know why we would need $15,000 for that, but I do think it's a priority to get that through the county and to get it over to Bluff.
So where would you put it? Rank it.
Yeah, I mean, how do we put them all at high?
Yeah,
You know? So
Go ahead, Jen.
I would say that that one is probably like medium because, I mean, it does incorporate us, but it also, as far as I can understand, incorporates a fair amount of cooperation with the county. So I kind of feel like that's out of our hands a little bit. At least that's kind of where I feel like we stand on it right now. I know when Ann's discussed it a few times, it's like, yes, I've been talking with Mac about it. But as for, to me, I'm kind of looking at what can we check off on this list as much as anything. So that's why I say medium, that we are working on it. But is it something that we're going to have a lot of control? Is it something that we personally can affect to get done real quickly as for priority stuff? So that would be a medium for me.
Yeah. So I guess same for me. Is there any like immediate like consequence for not getting to
No.
it either? Yeah. So that's, I would put it at medium for
we can
that.
still use it.
Yeah.
Still,
Yeah.
we still have
Medium.
volunteers.
What do you think, Linda?
Well, we kind of have, Ann's really been working on it and we do have some momentum. So, I mean, it would be good to keep, if we don't keep going, it's been, the county will tank it basically.
Gotcha. Medium, mid gear. We'll keep keep
Yeah.
pushing. Okay, cool. Awesome. So next is, we'll keep moving along so we can move over to the EPA thing, the conversation. So town buildings, solar installation at the BCC.
You skipped Parks and Rec.
I skipped Parks and Rec. Sorry, Parks and Rec. Parks and retention of green space.
And I think this one was more of the idea. Was there a parks plan in here? Planning for parks. I know like green space and parks come up a lot in the general plan and our strategic plan, all of these things. And so this is probably a helpful one to say, like, to have a little bit more of a description as to like, what would this money be going for? Is it planning? Is it the actual implementation? But thinking that it might encompass all of those things, what would be the priority on that?
I guess for me, it would probably settle into low at the moment, like, because we've got some other stuff going. I mean, it seems like we've got some green space projects we're already working on. I don't know, like, without having a plan, I would put it at low.
But is the plan like, we heard from Tina about the plan for West Park, trying to get grants or funding that a little bit to get that plan a little further along and make that park a little, because that's where we talked about the outhouse in a building kind of thing, the sidewalk or the lack of sidewalk, fixing the parking a little more, getting some water.
Given that this is probably going to be one that like continues on capital projects, like this is probably one of those recurring, like we always are going to find something that we can. I wonder if we can do it as like a low medium, but then ensure that like there's money annually or money like very close up front that can start the ball rolling. So it's not the most important thing we're going to be doing, but we know that this is like a long drawn out thing that is going to benefit the community. So it's like a low medium, but we'll allocate money annually kind of thing.
Can we like tier it out, like have that as the top group and then kind of tier out the different parks? I mean, because I feel like honestly we have parks on there 3 different places already, and we have kind of some different things in there that are being worked on, like Barwell Park. Where do we stand on that? Is that something that's still a park, but it's its own separate item as well?
That
So I
makes
kind of
sense.
feel like we're kind of addressing different parts of that
Got it.
as we're talking.
And
Totally.
cemeteries in parks.
True.
Well, on CCC, there could be a big park space there. I mean, who knows?
Yep.
Perfect. So in putting together the detailed descriptions, I will kind of start breaking these down, and then if someone finds something in the strategic plan that is referencing a park that we haven't already referenced that maybe this falls into, as opposed to just kind of this nebulous idea of we're going to support parks, let me know and we can like add it in or make sure that it's still referenced. Okay.
Awesome. So next is solar installation, BCC.
It's kind of, I mean, we're getting the pieces to that together, and it's down the road because it's dependent on the other things happening at the CCC first.
So back to what
Was
Jen
the-
said, it kind of goes up in that category under CCC renovation. Is like,
Yeah.
So this one's
Here's what-
BCC.
Correct.
This
Yep,
one's
you're right.
BCC.
Thanks for the clarification. Yeah, so this is for this building.
mhm.
I would like to not put it on the lower end because we have solar panels that are coming down, and I feel like it's important that we delegate those appropriately. And if we can't come to an agreement on how to do it exactly at the CCC, then we need to start moving on how we can put those to use at the BCC, because it doesn't do us any good to just sit there and pay for storage on those panels. We need to find a way that we can make them worthwhile for their use.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it has like, I guess, high consequence in the sense that we already have them. Like, so the more we sit on them and not doing anything, maybe the harder it is to use or whatever.
So we need, yeah,
to move
so-
them, so I'd put it high, I guess.
In the capital improvement part of it is first hiring the electrician to say where we can put them, where we could install them, what it takes to hook them up, get an estimate of, if we can put them on the roof here or what it is. We don't know what we're talking about till we get that person hired. And
So that leads into the next one, which is BCC roof replacement.
Which I think we had removed, but then we added back on because of the potential solar panel thing. So I don't know where this one was falling, because I remember this one going all over the
See, I think that one, if we put solar up there, then that would get any, screw repairs
It would just
done and just,
go
yeah,
with it. Okay.
is what I would recommend. Because again, we had somebody look at it and it was fine. It's metal. It's supposed to last a long time. But if we're gonna put solar up there, that's when we would have it looked at more closely and make sure that everything is sealed and.
Yeah, combo with the solar
Mhm.
installation.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Does that sound good? Then next is solar installation CCC.
So that goes up with that other town building CCC renovation, I would say. It's,
Do you want it at the same level?
Like high.
The high?
I think so, because if we have all the panels, same reason for whether we're gonna use them there or whether we're gonna use them here, or we can split and do both places.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. So
I just don't want to see those panels, just sit there and deteriorate and devalue.
Totally. Roads planning project. 10,000.
So that's already been approved and is already basically
High.
spent.
Yeah. High.
Yeah.
Well,
In
that was
progress,
already,
yeah.
with Jones and DeMille, that's already been approved with them to do the engineering on Cap Canyon and a couple of things, so that's, I don't think it needs to be on there.
I'm going to
Well,
keep it on there
on
so we
there.
can track it.
Yeah.
However, we'll move it to like an in progress category.
It's like the agenda part of it and all that. Or talking with Michael and
Yeah.
okay.
If that
There's still
works
some
for
other things to do.
you all.
All right, secondary water planning, 190,000.
And again, spitball, who knows how much that one's
Yeah.
going to cost? I have no idea. But yeah, secondary water. Planning.
Jen, go ahead.
I would like to put that as medium because I think that it's important that we look at it just with the state of water rights right now. I don't want to lose river water rights. I think that with tribal allocation and things like that, that's a real possibility. So I think that we need to put that on the medium list and really start to try to look into what would it take to develop a plan for that.
Yeah, and I don't know, medium seems a little bit high on my end just because I know how expensive it is, and I don't know, I don't know, maybe the water planning, strategic planning that's in process now will kind of lead a little more of that one way or the other, but the ones that I've seen, you need to have something that you're using the secondary water, you need to have, we all need to put in grass and orchards and all the rest for it to ever pay for itself. So I don't know. Of course, it would be nice if you just turn your tap on and it was river water, but the chances of it are quite slim in my mind. I think we could do a lot of work on it and still be in the same.
Well, I think there's some different options out there to look at, whether it be a ditch system, whether it be some type of cistern type system. That's why I say medium, is because I think we have some options that we could explore and look into. So that's why I say medium on that. Just so it shows that we're trying to make some attempt to use those water rights. I think that goes a long way in help protecting them rather than just saying, look, we don't have any plan to use these, period. I'm just afraid that those allocated rights might be easy to give away if there's no plan for them.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And I'm comfortable with medium because we're moving into the consultation process and all this stuff. I feel like it might be a hot topic anyways. It's like, so maybe.
Well, there's a lot of stuff we don't know about it,
Mhm.
which we will find out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So medium could go up or down. All right. Next is Main Street implementation.
Main Street planning.
Main Street planning. Good
Then-
Lord, I look under it one every
You're-
time.
you're-
Sorry. Main Street planning, 40,000.
So what is the origin of why that's on our list?
That goes into, I'm so sorry, I should have brought my, I don't know where my physical copy is. That one goes into the mindful growth in terms of, mindful growth for like expanding and diversifying economic opportunities, and would also tie into potentially could intersect with like the active transportation plan and things like that. But, you know, the idea of having a cute little town, I believe was the, is the description of it. And so, yeah, ties into very specifically the last portions of the plan.
Do you remember who was cheerleader, we'll call him? Who that person, or who was willing to try to figure out if we could make a main street out of our highway, or what, you know, like.
Oh, I want to say that it was one that I would probably you know, I think in what we were looking at with our strategic planners, it didn't come up as a current assigned one, because I mean it is further out.
What's the year on that one say?
I have it out. Like implementation would be past 5 years kind of thing, but we kind of need to like start planning for it.
So maybe.
So then put low on that one.
Yeah.
And again, like
or do we even need to keep it? I mean, I guess if it's in our strategic planning, then we should keep it on there, but I don't remember.
I think it's important for, especially the projects that we know are going to be really costly, that we keep them on the capital plan. So we say, hey, this could be a really big expense. Hey, it's something we might be looking for grants for. And again, like please add projects to this. That, you know, because that's the whole idea. It's still in our vision, in our vision, in our field of sight. But yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be one that's going to be, you know, down, and we need to get more funding for. But I don't want to lose sight of it.
Yeah, and you're right. Once the trail is in, that will lead to more walking, to more people being out of their cars and that kind of thing. So then it might be more apparent. But when we looked at all of the grants and things that are available, it was revitalizing downtowns and not necessarily creating a downtown. And we don't have anything to revitalize. We just are a strip along the highway.
That's why it needs
Yeah. And so that will do, you know, having.
I kind of disagree with that too. I mean, I know our highway is what we consider to be Main Street, but I think that, you know, I think it's real important to keep Black Locust in mind with that. We've talked about that with the strategic planning and how that impacts some housing type things. That, you know, I mean, I think Black Locust could really easily become that Main Street type area. So I definitely think that we could put it to low, but I don't want to see it disappear whatsoever.
Yeah, totally.
And
Awesome.
that kind of informs the implementation, which is clearly much further out.
Yeah, so if we're all comfortable with implementation low, next is free public Wi-Fi.
And that was a question of mine too, like where did that one, like, are we hoping to give everybody in Bluff, like we got fiber connected to everybody and we're going to pay everybody's bills?
No.
Are we going to have one
No.
hotspot that we're going to monitor? Because
I got the sense it was connectivity through hotspots is what I remember reading, but I can't remember.
This one was under like livable community culture and connections. And I remember it being, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I remember it being like free Wi-Fi at like community facilities.
Mm-hmm.
So like here,
Right.
that, you know, people could pull up and have free Wi-Fi.
Yeah, that way if you don't
like
have
the
service-
library. The library is, and that's been
Yes.
one of the things that's been a problem.
And that is part of the thing of like, do you have timers? Do you
Enforcement
have,
of, yeah,
you
how
know,
you do that.
connectivity?
Well, it's
limit.
also a matter of how do we broadcast it so you don't have to be sitting inside the community center to access the public Wi-Fi that's available at the community center. So, you know, I mean, I have to deal with broadcasting issues over here at La Posada all the time because I have very thick walls. So I have a different system. So if it's something that we need to look at with that, do we get like kind of a radio broadcasting system available that gives us a few more places that people can pull up outside? They don't have to have a business open necessarily to access free public Wi-Fi.
Well, and we're currently having conversations. You want to have conversations. Sorry, I haven't helped with it yet about IT, changing IT, or we're looking at our IT in general.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we can roll it up with that
I like
and
that.
keep it as maybe that's a medium, or is that a high for you
what
because
they
it's in
could-
the IT stuff?
What they could provide.
What they could provide, or what the plan for something like that could be.
I feel as though in comparison to these other projects, like some of which I did move that one up to critical for the roads because like we've got erosion and it's kind of a
Yeah.
so I said that's critical. But I think in terms of like when we think of a priority, I think medium fits
Medium.
it well. However, it's a medium priority that'll probably get accomplished sooner rather than later,
Okay.
kind of thing.
Okay.
If you guys are okay with that.
And then is anybody aware of any towns that just provide Wi-Fi? Because I know there are, but I can't really think of what they are, where you just come into
Well-
town, you can just, everybody gets it.
Do you mean just like Wi-Fi,
Yeah.
outside of like hotspots? No, like I mean like libraries and stuff like that.
There's some
And then-
towns that provide it completely.
Yeah,
But I don't know.
I've never heard, other than us getting it drilled right up to the house for such low cost. Like that's the best thing I've ever heard of. So, but otherwise, I mean, I know that's why like, McDonald's and things like that take up
Right.
a lot of that burden too. You have businesses
Right.
that are doing it. So,
Yeah, but there are some towns, maybe I'll search that and see which ones they are, but it's, it's a way to provide it to everybody, but we're probably not financially suited yet to be able to do.
I mean, I think it would be good for businesses in town to have, if people are tourists are coming in, they don't have service for whatever reason, or they're international, they can pull up menus and blah, 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 and do all that storefronting, I don't know, but yeah, just limited to several hotspots.
Okay.
All right.
I think that if there were some kind of grant that we could get that maybe not provide it for free, but maybe help reduce the cost of it for faster or something like that. I know that is becoming an issue with rural communities. I mean, that's part of the reason that we got Emory to come down here anyways, was because we're in a Wi-Fi drought area, and that became blatantly obvious when the kids had to go to school on computers, and 3/4 of our population doesn't have the connectivity that would support that. So I think that in looking at it that way, I don't know that we could ever get it for free, but maybe we could continue to look for, are there grants that we could apply to that might help make it more accessible and available cost-wise for people?
I know
Maybe if they're at an income level, they can apply for assistance on that or something.
I know it's a big federal push for rural connectivity. So maybe there's something in there we could go for, but medium. Okay, cool. And then last is Barwell. Sounds like
I think this is Ann's big pet peeve, so I think that we should put it on a higher priority to figure out what to do with it at least.
I wonder I think it's one of those, like, it's high priority because we need to figure out, like, as Jim said, what are we doing with it? Are we making money? Are we spending money on it? Yeah. So high in that some action items need to be taken. So we don't, from a fiscal standpoint, it's important that we address it as soon as possible.
Yeah, we don't know what we're talking about yet with it, so probably pretty high.
But we'll put it as high. I appreciate you all not marking everything as high priority, but also recognizing that like these are important projects. We do want to make progress on them. I think it's important that as we continue these conversations and our strategic planning conversations, that like we're assigning project owners, we're assigning deadlines and timelines and all about those action items and getting stuff done. So clearly I have a number of them to take away from this. So I'm hoping I can present this before our next work session, but if it is at our next work session, maybe this can be an area where we pick out like one or two of these and say, we really want to say, what are we doing with this asset?
And it is really hard to get rid of a town asset
It is.
because you
Yes.
have to have really high reasons. And so that's,
Big discussions.
I mean, I guess we need those questions answered, but to get rid of an asset is probably going to be next to impossible without a really high reason to do so.
I know it is possible, but yeah, there's a lot that goes into it and the bidding and
Well, we
reasons and.
got 4 minutes left as scheduled, so I'm going to push us to, since we got through that, good work. Good Lord. We just,
that was good.
yeah, all right. Work session indeed. All right. Number 5, last thing before other EPA project bids. How much can we get?
Okay, so I think in this, I'll just talk about what happened today and then next steps and what we would be looking for the council to have a very productive joint meeting with Utah Deneva next week. So we got 2 bids. I would say that these are qualified bids and that they turned everything in. It was in hand on time, although there was a concern because we thought there was a third one and it was whatever. So we got them in. We have physical copies. I've got an office copy that we'll keep in office. And then I have electronic copies. So each of the council members should have received the electronic copies. We have one from Indigenous Design Studio and Architecture, and we have one from Uncommon Architects. And it should be noted that Uncommon Architects has partnered up with some other engineering firms because there are specific elements of the project that say they need mechanical or they need electrical. And so they partnered up and have kind of submitted like a joint bid, but the primary consultant would be Uncommon Architects, LLC, excuse me. So council should be reviewing these documents thoroughly. The design review committee will meet again next week on Tuesday to kind of start narrowing down, having some, bullet points of, kind of considerations. We'll bring those considerations to the joint meeting, but there is a joint meeting on Wednesday, August 21st at 11 a.m. And the goal of that meeting would be for Town of Bluff and Utah Deneva to be able to decide on an architectural firm and even vote. I'm going to talk to Ann, but my hope is that we can bill it as like a special meeting so you all would still have the ability to vote during that meeting and we can move that forward. So they have both firms have provided a fee schedule. They've provided a timeline schedule. They've listed, other works that other projects that they've worked on. So you're going to want to go through these pretty in depth. And yeah, really exciting that we got that in. And as a reminder, there is a matrix that was part of the RFP process. I can get you each a copy of that, but that's what we really want to look at in terms of criteria. So 50% of that criteria is cost, and then it does have the breakdown of, they've got pre-bids experience here, they're going to be able to meet timelines here. And so, as we have this conversation, we want it structured around that evaluation criteria. That is what we put out to the bidders that we would be doing. Just so you are aware, Indigenous Design Studio and Architecture, LLC, their total bid amount was $473,220. Uncommon Architects came in at $176,000. So I will say, just from initial, there's a large price discrepancy between these two. But again, it is very important that we read through. Everyone needs to read through these bids.
And those physical copies will be here for people to look through, not to mark up on, but to look through.
We do want to keep clean copies of these. And then, everyone should have those in your inbox right now.
They opened just fine.
They did. Perfect.
There are very similar pages in each document where you can compare where those differences are coming from, those price differences. And then the meeting is 11 to 4:30.
11 to 4. It'll be 11 to 4 on Wednesday.
And that's the same day as John
Curtis's visit. Yeah.
So not 11:30 anymore. We're doing 11.
We're doing 11. We'll have lunch. We'll have some introductions. Probably the meeting will really kind of kick off 45 minutes or so after our start. And then some additional items on that. We're going to go over again some of the financial impacts, the timelines. UDB has had a number of questions that they just want to address in a joint meeting. But really, the goal of that meeting is that we are able to decide how we want to move forward with the architectural bid. And huge thanks to the firms for putting all this together. I know it's a lot of work, and huge thanks to Malia. Literally could not have done it without her. So Great job, Malia. Cool. Other questions about the bid or the process or anything that we need to address this week before we start digging in?
All right. Anything else before we move on? Excellent. All right. So we're on to other. Does anybody have any other? All right. Then we're on to number 7, if anybody would like to do the honors.
Hang on, we do have a BWW water board meeting tomorrow, just in case anybody wants to go.
Yep.
That's kind of the other. And I motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Right.
I'm
Aye.
5:32.
All right. It is 5:32. Meeting will close.